Yeah, the local authorities, you said, they lead on recovery. The recovery is the process of rebuilding, restoring and rehabilitating the community following an emergency. And there's a slide there which indicates the link in with response and recovery. This is really to assist communities towards management of their own recovery, and it's a recognition that where a community experiences a significant emergency, there's a need to supplement personal, family and community structures that have been disrupted. Recovery should be done with the community, not to the community. And the process, as you can see there, it really begins from the moment an emergency commences and it begins. The arrangements recognise the complex, dynamic and protracted nature of the recovery processes and the changing needs of those affected individuals. I'm going to put a slide that, as I said, we've got some details there in terms of our contacts people might wish to make note of. And as I said, for those that have perhaps joined us more latterly, we're going to have a question and answer session at the end, so if you do have anything, you'll have the opportunity. I'm going to now introduce Martin Hutchins and John Galt from Flood Management Authority, Devon County Council, to provide their part of the presentation. Welcome, Martin and John.
You're on mute, Martin.
There we go. Sorry about that. Evening, Katie. Thank you very much for that. It's always a technical hitch. Just got a few slides here to run through. Good evening. Yes, I'm Martin Hutchins, the Flood and Coastal Risk Manager, and with me tonight as well as John Galt, Flood Risk Engineer, who will be taking things forward at Barnstaple. And as it happens in the audience as well, Michaela D'Souza with us as well, who actually prepared the Section 19 report, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. So, well, can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Forward. So, as I said, flooding event in Barnstaple last year in August, which is unseasonal, and I have to admit it was the worst event that we've experienced in Devon since we became the lead local flood authority in 2010 in terms of property count. As I say, there are 118 residential properties and 46 commercial properties, and obviously we sympathise with all those that have suffered as a result. Sheer volume of rain that caused the event just completely exceeded the capacity of all the drainage systems. As you can see there, a bit blurry, but that's a radar image, and the white blob in the middle literally landed over the top of Barnstaple and just emptied out during that afternoon. And drainage systems just can't cope with that sort of rainfall coming down. They're not designed to take that sort of rainfall, and obviously took a couple of hours to catch up on itself and then drained away. So really have to move forward from that and sort of see what we can do to improve the situation. As a response, I mean, North Devon Council have to really commend the response provided by the District Council. Particularly Alex really gave us a lot of support, dealt with locally, really helped to gather information which really supported us taking things forward. For some of them, I'm not aware, but a system called FORT, it's the Flood Online Reporting Tool, which you can access via our website for reporting a flood. And this isn't a response tool, but it's more about gathering information so we can understand exactly what has happened and where the flooding has occurred. So this really helped us to produce the Section 19 report, which we as the lead local flood authority have to produce. It's very high level, so the information, the details not there yet. It really is there to find out or recognise that a flooding event has occurred, where it's occurred, what the sort of source of the flooding is, and then also to identify who the most relevant authority is that can actually take it forward. So if we just take a look at the actual event, as a result of thought and the information we were able to gather on the properties, the red dots are the commercial properties and the green being residential. As you can see, it's very, very widespread across Barnstaple, and it really is going to be a challenge of delivering a single scheme that's going to protect everyone, and some may not be able to be incorporated within a single scheme, but we'll obviously look to see what we can do there. So taking that forward now, I'm going to pass on to my colleague John Galt. So he's responsible now for hopefully coming up with some sort of solutions. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Martin. So looking at flood risk in Barnstaple, and with the audience on the call, this will be relevant for all the parishes and communities as well. There are multiple sources of flood risk. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to give a short summary over who is responsible for managing what. We have in Barnstaple specifically the tidal estuary and the main river elements, which is managed by our colleagues at the Environment Agency. Surface water is ourselves at Devon County, acting as the lead local flood authority, or LLFA. Highway drainage would also be Devon County Council, but as the highway authority. And it's worth noting that we are two separate teams and departments within the authority. The underground sewerage network, which encompasses foul, combined and surface water pipework, is South West Water. Ordinary watercourses such as smaller streams and waterways is the responsibility of landowners and the district council. So as you can see, in a location like Barnstaple, there are multiple sources of risk interacting with each other, and it's really important that we as risk management authorities work together to find holistic solutions to problems emanating from these sources. And apologies if you can hear my cat. Silly thing. Next slide, please, as Professor Whitty would say. Cool. So Devon County Council Flood Risk Management, we cover a significant patch, the whole of Devon, the clues in the name, but we do have limited resources, both in terms of people, and to put that into context, I am 50% of the team covering the delivery of capital works in the county, and funding. So because of the large number of locations at risk across the county, we therefore require funding support from DEFRA and the Treasury for works that we want to undertake. The current funding window closes within this month, and the new 6-year programme commences in April this year, ongoing till March in 2027. So in response to the Barnstaple flood event, we've notified DEFRA and the Environment Agency, and I say the Environment Agency because they administer the funds on behalf of DEFRA, that we're going to be developing a surface water orientated scheme for the town, and that funding will be required to do that. So this has resulted in an indicative line being shown on their programme. So we at Devon County have also included Barnstaple as one of our highest priority communities in our recently revised and published strategy. And to ensure that we get going and hit the ground running, we've already engaged with our consultant, WSP, not only to investigate the surface water flood risk in the town more thoroughly, but also develop and design solutions. So so we will, as per the previous slide, be coordinating with our colleagues from the other risk management authorities to ensure that what's proposed will give as wide a benefit to the maximum number of people as possible. As Martin showed on the map of the event with all those green and red dots, due to the widespread nature of the flooding, it is very unlikely that a one-size-fits-all approach will be able to find one. So we're going to have to think on our feet and come up with some clever solutions. There may well be some quick wins we can identify and accelerate through to delivery. However, and this is where, despite being positive and a glass half full kind of guy, I've got to manage expectations. And it's worth noting that kind of the national average between a flood event starting the investigation and the delivery of works is in the region of 5 years. And even that could be seen as slightly optimistic. So our line for Barnstable on the programme is currently showing an allocation for the 22-23 financial year for the commencement of the delivery of the solution. However, like I said, we remain committed, and we are committed to accelerating this and getting out on site as soon as possible to deliver flood benefit to those people who really need it most. And as I say, if there's any quick wins identified in the interim, we'll get on and deliver them as soon as we can. And that's me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was really insightful. We're going to move on in terms of our presentation to the Devon Communities Together, and we welcome Martin Rich. Martin, are you able to unmute yourself?
Right, sorry, chasing the buttons around the screen.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay. Right, are you seeing that as a full screen?
No,
Not yet, Martin.
Yeah, right.
If you just click the from beginning, top left,
Yeah.
that's one.
Right. Oh, well done. Thank you.
well done.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, my contact details. Will make sure you've got these slides afterwards, and so a lot of information on our website. But certainly, if you've got questions about your individual needs, then get in touch with me, and I'm very happy to help. Okay, quick advert for ourselves, celebrating our 60th anniversary at Devon Communities Together. Do a wide range of things with the rural communities in Devon, including the coastal and market towns. So if tonight doesn't excite you, might be a few other things on our list that are up there that you might be interested in. And again, get in touch and I can point you in the direction of the person you need to talk to. Okay, so we've heard tonight that the whole basis of emergency planning is a national structure. What I'm talking about is bringing it down to the local level and the degree of knowledge and understanding you have of your local circumstances. But at whatever level we're operating, the objectives are the same. And I think that looking at the slide here, you can see just how very relevant the objectives which are set for the big players are also very relevant to us in our local communities. So often I go out and talk to parish councils, and the initial response is, yeah, well, don't really need a formal plan, you know, we're pretty good. Anything happens, we'll all pull together, get it sorted out, and we know what to do. But you know, as I say to them, if you've got a plan, you've got a framework to work to. You've taken the time to consider what the risks are, how you might address them, who's available, and so forth. So, you know, the whole essence of a plan is that it prepares you, and things may never go exactly according to plan, but the very fact that you've been through that process of thinking it through, that you've alerted to people to the possibilities that they will be involved in delivering an emergency plan, or they need to take action to protect themselves, you know, actually better prepares your community. So in the southwest, the sort of overarching local resilience forum covers from Devon right through to the Isles of Scilly. And if you want to get a good insight into what local resilience is all about, then have a look at their sort of regularly published risk register, and that gives you a good insight into what the whole emergency planning, local resilience is in terms of what we're trying to project today. But again, you will understand that they can only work at that regional level. And whilst there are lots of plans and diagrams and information, it's only at that very local level that you know which side of the street will flood first, you know which gullies overflow, you know where the local resources are in terms of dealing with emergencies. And so whilst we talk a lot about the big formal structures, it's down at the community level that we can really help ourselves, and that local response, what we often refer to as first on the scene, can be very important in the impact. So again, going back to those formal structures, we're operating at what's known as the bronze level, and more commonly referred to the operational level. Now, for most emergencies, an incident commander will be appointed. Quite often that's from the police, and it's one of their resources can be your local emergency plan, so they can have somebody in their ear telling them what the local resources are as they're preparing to deal with an incident. And often when they come on site, they are appreciative of the local support, so people who can point out, where the local facilities are, where they can set up a base, what's available, and groups who can pitch in and help and do the things that aren't part of the major operation but are essential to addressing an emergency. So that's all that operational level, and the whole field is actually driven with jargon. And if you listen to members of the emergency services when they're talking on the local TV, they tend to use that sort of clipped expressions, and that's because they are using very precise language. And part of our sort of introduction to local emergency plans is helping you understand that. So it's not essential that you understand, you use it, but it is just understanding what is meant. So there are specifics about what is an emergency plan, what the process of emergency planning involves, and most importantly is what we call the emergency planning cycle. So it's learning from events, keeping your plan up to date, because this isn't something you do once, put it on the shelf and forget about it. A good local community plan is going to get reviewed at least once a year, and regularly updated. And if there is an incident, you can learn from that and revise your plan accordingly. So as I say, there is a lot of jargon involved, and what we try to do is sort of do a bit of jargon busting for you. And when we're running coaching sessions for local emergency planning teams, we'll go through that so they just understand that when they're sort of looking at the technical terms of the emergency planning business, they've got some comprehension of what's being said to them. One example I sort of quite often like to give is emergency. We all think we know what an emergency is, and if you look at the Oxford English Dictionary, it's exactly what it says on the tin. My preference is the Wikipedia, which puts a bit more flesh on the bones and sort of gets you to consider the wider aspects of an emergency, and particularly sort of how you can address it and the aftermath. But in terms of the official definition, the Cabinet Office actually has a form of words of what constitutes an emergency. So technically, what is an emergency to you as a community, or an incident, or an inconvenience, something that needs addressing, might not actually classify as an emergency. But the important thing is, whatever the situation, whatever you call it, you have a local resource that can actually respond and deal with it. So I'm quite pleased to bring this one back to North Devon, because I first used this slide in Barnstable a couple of years ago to explain what a catastrophic emergency, when all the grand plans are set aside and the government move in and take over. And we couldn't really think of an example of when that might happen, but lo and behold, here we are with the coronavirus emergency, and the government has stepped in and taken control. So my prediction that we would all be doomed is I think pretty justified. I spent hours trying to unpick government advice for communities on our helpline. So in Devon, we have our own local resilience board, and that is very orientated towards helping you as communities. You know, the whole reason for being there is to get communities engaged in the process and to provide the support. So what we're about is giving you the guidance to put in place an emergency plan, giving you the support to do that. Twice a year, we have a meeting of the Resilience Forum, where those who are engaged in their local emergency plans can come along, or those who are just interested. The last couple we've held electronically, but we're looking forward to getting back face to face. And that's an opportunity to hear speakers from the various support services, sometimes to undertake sort of desktop exercises or see demonstrations. A really good example, opportunity to come together and exchange ideas and just sort of pick up ideas about what other people are doing. And then the really important part, and the bit that I will nag on forever about, is the database where your local emergency plan sits, because that's an important resource for the emergency services. So when your plan is completed, it doesn't go on the shelf, it goes onto the database. It comes to us at Devon Communities and we arrange the loading, and it's there as an essential resource. And the format of the database is important. It's a nationally used format, so that if everybody uses the same format, we know where to go. If we want a piece of information, we know exactly where it is in the plan, which appendix, which item number, and we're able to go in and do it. So that's where we're heading, is sort of a combination of a plan that sits on the database, a plan that sits in the community, and an action team to put that plan into operation. So behind it, we've got all these different organisations, the district councils, and all the others that you've heard about tonight, and they're all sort of supporting it, and they're all useful sources of information as we go forward. So, commonly referred to, the title of the organisation, the Resilience Forum. So what do we mean by resilience? And again, it has an official definition. But what we try to do is to sort of interpret that for you, and we'll work with your emergency planning team so they can understand what's involved. So it's understanding the risks, both those that can happen externally and those things that happen locally, what your vulnerabilities are, and really sort of try and get you excited, interested in taking action, and just preparing yourself for emergencies. And you've seen the list of organisations that are potential partners. We can sort of dip into their skills and knowledge to help you frame your local emergency plan, and to understand how you will interact with them, should there be an event. Right. So in terms of an emergency plan for where? I suppose the majority are based on parishes. There's no reason why two or more parishes can't work together, particularly if there is a related problem. So, if you're sharing a common water catchment or something like that, it may make sense to work together. We work with complete towns. Sometimes we drill down to the village level, and sometimes into smaller, just specific locations where there are problems and there's a need to set up a local emergency plan to react to situations. And it may be that a town plan two would be divided up into locations, up into areas, so it's in bite-sized chunks and not something that's too unwieldy and not manageable. So what we'll do is go through the process of the risk assessment, identifying the things that might happen, and that's being sensible and sort of identifying the higher risk areas. You can be obviously pretty extreme, but for a lot of us it tends to be weather related, but there are other issues that it's important to consider and address. And I suppose a pandemic is one that very few communities saw coming in their emergency plans. So it's not just about reacting to the emergency, but it's also thinking about, well, how can we actually prevent this happening in the first place? Or if it does kick off, what can we do to reduce the impact? And setting up the local first responder team. So having those feet on the ground, people who are prepared to take action, either to mitigate the emergency or just help the community to prepare and evacuate or do whatever it is that it needs to do. As I touched on earlier on, that local response, because it is structured, because it's thought through the processes, it is appreciated by the emergency services, and they will tap in. They won't just sort of jump out of their trucks and say, "No, it's all right, boys, we're here, we'll take over." But they will be grateful for that local knowledge and that local resource that can help them. We've heard a little about the involvement of the district councils in community recovery, but resources tend to be spread very thinly, and so where we have an event which really causes many emergency plans to be activated, then chances are that community recovery is going to be very locally driven. And so again, it's just thinking about what you need to do to recover from the situation, how you can help the community, resources you can put in place, and that very important that learning cycle. So being able to say, well, how does the experience help us produce a better plan for next time round? As I said, it can be many risks, lots and lots of things. So we've really hit the headlines. Coincidentally, back during the early stages of lockdown, I was talking to the local councillor for that area about the possibility of having a local emergency plan. I don't think we'd have got it off the ground in time, but it would have come in helpful. But that incident is a very good example of how sort of teams are pulled in to help, and we saw many different groups coming in to help with informing the population and the evacuation, and it seemed rather strange to have sort of people in mountain rescue gear wandering around Exeter University campus, but they had the skills and they were brought in to do a job. If you wonder about lions, just remember you have got a zoo up in North Devon. I think with the pandemic, what we've seen there is a lot of community effort come together, and that's a resource to be cherished really, and to be captured. As we move out of lockdown, then the chances are a lot of those groups will disperse, but that is knowledge that would very usefully go into their experience, very usefully inform a local emergency plan, and they are potentially the people that you could recruit into your local response team. So let's not let that opportunity go by. Let's not let that resource evaporate, but sort of plug into it and get those people engaged and learn from what they've done. We've just in the last few days been talking to local response teams, and it's been very interesting to learn the sort of range of activities and how they set themselves up. So from our point of view, there's a job to be done in terms of introducing that into emergency planning. And I'm sure it will be a topic of one of the next forum meetings. So Often I'll go along to a parish council, or tonight we're talking to a lot of parish councillors. But what I would say to you is it's not something, it's just not another job that's being lumped onto parish councillors. Often you can be the initiators, you can sort of give it your blessing and get it underway. But quite often you'll find there are people within your community that have got the knowledge and got the experience. So there are people who've worked with the armed services, worked with the emergency services, have other skills that are relevant and will come forward and put a plan together. And with our guidance and with all the materials and the templates that are available, it's not a massive task. It takes a bit of doing, but a small group of people can come together and put together a very useful and comprehensive local emergency plan. But if you do nothing else and just produce what I refer to as a passive plan, so it just contains the basic information of who the contacts are locally, what the resources are, where the meeting places are, where the emergency services might set up. Just some very basic information that describes your community and at least gives a responding service a bit of an insight to what they're coming into. But a more active plan, then that's rolling our sleeves up and really getting involved. It's getting the whole community involved. Part of the process is actually communicating an individual or a household response pack. So just sort of getting people to think about how they would respond to an emergency and to have all the things to hand that they would need, were they called upon to move into the top of their house or evacuate or in some way respond to an event. So it works right down to that household level as well as at the community level. Part of setting up the group is also getting some equipment together that helps you respond. So whether it's yellow jackets or poles for finding your way through floodwater or ropes or sandbags, whatever you require. Training, again, local training sessions can be set up, and we also do it as part of the forum events. So you can come along and learn the best ways to sandbag, protect buildings and so forth, how to handle floodwaters, all sorts of different things that are very useful to know. And occasionally we can sort of arrange rehearsals, so we can work with communities to have a test run, and then again back to that old recycling the information, so analysing what we've learned and getting it embedded into our future plans. So what we do to get you started, I'll come along and talk to parish councils or zoom into parish councils if that's what's needed. But once you've decided to go, then we're quite happy to run workshops for whoever's going to compile the plan. And hopefully as a result of today's event, we will get a number of communities coming forward wishing to do this, and so we can put together several workshops possibly and bring you all together, so you can have a useful exchange of ideas as part of your building process. There is a guide and that's available on our website, and there is a template, and as I said, that is a national format, and I will nag you till you're fed up with hearing me say you must stick to the template, don't go away and do your own thing. That format is very important to us. And then what we can do, if you have particular aspects of your plan where you need some expert input, you've seen the big resource that is behind us, and so we can tap into that and make the contacts for you, so you can get expert advice on addressing those particular local needs. And even if you've not started a plan, you're very welcome to sort of come along to one of the forum events and just find out what it's all about. Because I think rubbing shoulders with others, finding out what other communities have done, and also particularly their experience of of using their emergency plan and actually seeing it in force and in anger is very useful at sort of motivating you to get on and get something done. So we've already talked about identifying your community. So is it going to be the parish, the village, is an area of the town? How do you want to do it? And then what local groups have you got? Who can you build in with? So what's existent? You don't have to sort of start from scratch. There's often existing groups that you can work with. Setting up the groups and the sort of communication structure, so people to pull it all together, and quite often an emergency plan will have a coordinators and a communications sort of network to make sure that you are able to effectively respond and the whole thing doesn't fall down just because a key person has gone to town for the day. Vulnerability is something we will explore more in the workshops, because that can have many different meanings. So it's not just people who are frail or old or something. It can be people who live in an area of particular risk, so are vulnerable to flooding. And again, we just need to sort of consider what we mean by vulnerability and identifying those who are potentially vulnerable in your communities. We'll spend some time working on the risk assessment with you, which is the important part, because that's the basic framework that gives you the head start, if you like, because often once you've identified a risk, you can think about how you can go about minimizing it or actually preventing things happen. And what will also help you do is sort of identify what skills there are within your community. So who's got the 4x4s, the chainsaws, where are the places of safety, who can help out, look after people who have been evacuated. One bit that really exercised me is the barrack room lawyers who come along and tell me that there's all sorts of issues around insurance and health and safety. There isn't. It's common sense. It's easily dealt with, and it's part of the training that we provide. Looking at locations within your community, so where are the places of refuge, where can the emergency services base themselves, and where's the best place to put vehicles and so forth. Is there a potential for a helicopter site in your community? So where can the air ambulance or the police drop in? And then all the things around emergency contacts, so knowing who to get a hold of, things like the local news network, all the emergency services, local authorities, people at the Environment Agency, again, having a good list of contacts that you can dip into. And as I say, that all goes into your plan, and it all goes onto a confidential database. And just as an aside, what you do is you write up the full plan with all your contacts and all that confidential information, and then you take the confidential stuff out, and it's what they call the redacted version, and that you can put up on your community website and generally publish for public consumption. But we make certain that the information we have is strictly confidential. Okay, you'll be pleased to know there's some money around. So there's a few £100 available to pump prime, get things started, perhaps hold a public meeting or pay for a bit of materials or so forth, pay for some leafleting to get you underway. And once you've got your plan up and running, then if there are some sort of flood issues, and there may be more money available through another one of our schemes, but also we can signpost you to other sources of funding. And I know that in parts of the county councillors have been very good with their community allocation, and being prepared to support local flood plans. So getting near the end, your new baby. Okay, it's going to take time. It's going to take 3 or 4 months to pull it together. You're going to have to Zoom in with us or come along to some of our meetings. So, you know, it's not something you can just sort of pull the template out and put it in. It is going to require some time and effort to pull it together. And you're going to have to stick at it, because, you know, these things never happen quite as easily as you want to. People aren't as forthcoming. They never do quite what they said they would do. So it you know, takes a bit of patience, but at the end of it, you know, it will all come together. So okay, get the basic information, the toolkit, which we'll give you a bit of an induction to, and the template, and off you go. You know, and you will have a very comprehensive and a very workable emergency plan. Okay, that's me done. So we'll take the questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was really useful. I particularly like your slide on the jargon busting. That touched a chord with me. Yeah, that was brilliant. I'm going to hand over now to the Environment Agency. We've got Kate Pearson, Liz Taylor, and Chris Kahn that will get up next. So welcome to the EA, please.
Right. The bad news is that I've got their slides, so we're just going to see if we can get those up. Right. Is that up?
That looks good, Martin.
Good. Right, okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Martin. That was really interesting talk. I work for the Environment Agency, and I work with my colleagues who are with me tonight, Kate Pearson and Liz Taylor, and we're based at Exeter, covering Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. We raise awareness of the dangers and impacts of flooding so that people can keep safe and know when to prepare. We help people understand what action they can take to stay safe and minimise damage. And we find this works really well with organisations like schools, the media, local councils, emergency services, libraries, and community volunteers. And I think it's really important that we raise flood awareness together. Can the next slide, Martin?
Good. Oh dear.
Don't worry.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
That's all right. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We do this because flooding is the most common and widespread natural disaster in the UK. So since 1998, there's been at least one serious flood every year. And as you've heard about the floods in Braunton in 2012, not the first time that Braunton has been flooded. And more recently in 2018 in Combe Martin. And as you've already heard, the flash flooding that happened in Barnstaple last August. And we know as well that climate change increased the flood risk with climate change. While the Environment Agency and local councils, we're doing everything we can to reduce the risk of flooding. You know, we know it's a natural process and can never be completely eliminated. An example of this is that we've got flood schemes around the county. And when we get some of these big floods, they just overwhelm our defences. So flood defences have their part to play, but they just sometimes can't take the amount of flows that we are seeing, particularly in recent years. Our flood resilience team is the only team solely dedicated to preparing our staff. So we're working with our partners and customers for the next flood, really, and building resilience and also aiding the recovery. And I've got a few statistics for you. The average cost of flood damage to a home is about £30,000 I was talking to some insurance industry a few years ago, and they're saying, well, how much money do you pay for your insurance? And I think I pay £200 or £300 a year, but the average cost is about 30,000 for a claim. And to a business, it's about £82,000 to a business claim as well. So, and that doesn't include all the emotional stress and trouble that goes with such an event. Thank you, Martin. As you can see, there's a picture of Lynmouth there in August 1952. North Devon is particularly vulnerable to dangerous flash flooding. We've got a fantastic flood archive in Exeter, thousands of records of flooding that we've been collecting for many years, and a lot of the flash flooding events have been recorded in North Devon, and it seems like they're on the increase. And some of you obviously will be aware of the flood at Lynmouth, which catastrophically claimed 34 lives in that area. So it was really tragic. And I don't know if anyone's been to the Memorial Hall in Lynmouth, but it's certainly worth a visit. It's a really good hall to go and see. Lots of information there about that event. Next slide, please, Martin. Yes, it won't happen in my lifetime. As I said before in the previous slide, North Devon is particularly vulnerable to dangerous flash flooding. And this is basically due to the geography of the landscape, with short watercourses draining steep-sided valleys, and they react really quickly to rainfall. And the situation can become really dangerous in the event of sustained torrential rainfall. We know water's got a lot of force, and with enough power to move, boulders, cars, damaged buildings, bridges. We often see in floods bridges being damaged. Often this occurs with little or no warning, particularly in these smaller catchments. Our research indicates as well that most people think flash flooding isn't going to happen to them. And over the last 23 years, I've been working in many communities and visited many communities that have suffered from flooding. And I'm often told, I didn't think it would happen here, or it's happened once before, but I certainly didn't think it would happen again. So we are seeing, as I said, repeated flooding and flash flooding events. I think while these extreme flash flood events don't happen very often, as I said, we're seeing a lot more of them, and there is a long history of these events in the Southwest region. Next slide, Martin, thank you. What do the events have in common? Rainfall intensity, flash flooding. All events took place in mid-August, and if you look through our flood archive, you'll see many of the biggest floods have been in the summer months. I think a lot of people tend to think that flooding happens in the winter time, but definitely in Devon and Cornwall, we have seen some really extreme floods going back hundreds of years. But there's probably the biggest floods we've experienced have been in that sort of July, August period. And it's a real big concern because of the additional numbers of people on holiday in the area. And many of these people won't know about those potential flash flooding risks. I think it's also important to be aware that that season is soon approaching us again. As the days begin to lengthen, we start to move into spring, the weather begins to change. And as the land, is warming up in the summer months, the occurrence of convective rainfall becomes more likely. And these showers are much more localised and much harder to forecast, and they can be very intense, as I've said. And we've experienced one valley being really affected badly, and then the next, there's hardly a drop of rainfall. I had a bit of information given to me by somebody who was a rainfall observer in Barnstable in the event last year. So I'll just read that to you. It said last Monday, as no doubt you know, Barnstable experienced a fairly short but extremely intense downfall. I've had a few inquiries about my own measurements as nearby Chivener is unusual site quoted for Barnstable's rainfall records. However, driven it. However, do you not the same intensity of rain? I've measured 61.6 millimeters, making it the heaviest daily amount for 24 hours since the 28th of the 7th, 1969. However, on that occasion, it was steady rain over hours, not like Monday's deluge of less than an hour. So that was just somebody picking up some rainfall information for us. The slides, next one, please, Martin. Are you there, Martin?
Sorry, yeah, it seems to be a bit of a...
Okay, that's fine.
Right,
No problem.
okay,
No problem.
okay. Yeah, found a way of doing it.
That's fine.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, so we've here are the rapid response catchments in North Devon. We've got 384 actually in the country, but 77 of them are in Devon and Cornwall, and that's about 20% of England's total. And 18 are in North Devon district, so that's 23% of the rapid response catchment in Devon and Cornwall. And I think with this thunderstorm season approaching, we're about to start a flash flood warning awareness campaign. So it's going to be involving direct mail shots to communities at risk, so they know what to do and how to stay safe. And we're also expanding our free flood warning service to include many of these locations. So, if you can please help us to raise awareness of the risk, contact us to request a flash flood action guide, which we've got, or post community posters, that would be really useful. And next slide, please, Martin. And the final slide for me is, I think we can all take easy steps to prepare for the possibility of flooding and reduce the impacts. And there's the number of ways you can do this. Check your risk at gov.uk, entering your postcode, sign up to our free flood warning service with Floodline. And you can also, as Martin mentioned, prepare an emergency plan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. It's Liz here. Are you all right to move on to the next slide, please, Martin? Brilliant, thank you. So, do you know what to do in a flood? This slide shows the 3 levels of warnings that we issue: flood alert, flood warning, and severe flood warning. And underneath it outlines the steps that you should take at each of these levels. So flood warnings give people valuable time to prepare for flooding, time that allows them to move themselves, their families, and precious items to safety. Flood warnings also save lives. They enable the emergency services to prepare and help communities. So the Environment Agency provide free flood warnings to 40,000 properties across Devon and Cornwall to warn of the risk of flooding from rivers and the sea. And anyone can sign up by visiting the Flood Destroy website. And there's a link to that website on this slide. Or you can call Floodline on the number that's shown on the slide. So the flood resilience team that Chris and Kate and I work in maintains and improves our flood warning service. We ensure our duty staff, the public, and our professional partners receive increasingly timely, accurate, informative warnings, operational messages, and criteria to manage our flood defence assets and activate operational plans. And as Chris mentioned, we're currently making improvements to meet our corporate ambition to offer a forecast-led service to 100% of customers at high risk of flooding by autumn 2022. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Martin? Thank you. So, while the Environment Agency and local councils do everything we can to reduce the chance of flooding, it is a natural process and can never be completely eliminated. So I'm sure you'll agree it's important to be prepared for any residual flood risk. On this map of North Devon, the green shows communities that already have a plan for flooding. Orange are the ones that we're working with and have plans in development. And yellow are the communities we will work with to raise awareness of flood risk and encourage preparedness. So if you do live in one of these yellow communities, please do get in touch with us if you would like support in developing your community flood plan. If you just move on to the next slide, please, Martin. On this slide, we've got some contact details. You can email us on the email address on the slide, which I think we'll also put in the chat box if it's not already in there. You can give Floodline a call and they can provide information to you and put you in touch with us. It's also, I think Martin mentioned, it's a really great idea to work with other communities who are in a similar geographical situation to you. And we can put you in touch with those communities, or alternatively, you can contact Devon Community Resilience Forum for advice and support. I'll hand over to Kate, who's going to cover the next slides.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Chris. Martin, could you move us on to the next slide, please? Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we've talked about the importance of reducing the impacts of flooding, but didn't want to forget that it's also important to try and reduce the chance of flooding. And as Liz, Chris and our partners have already said, the Environment Agency, North Devon Council and Devon County Council all work together to explore options to reduce the chance of flooding and to submit business cases to government to bid for funding to take those ideas forward as well. So I just wanted to ask you all a quick question and get your views on this. Which of these pictures illustrates a picture of a flood defence? Does anyone want to shout out what they think the answer is?
B.
Yeah.
A.
A, the Black Gate.
A.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
they're both right. They're both right. Thank you. Picture in A is a photo of one of the flood defence gates on a flood defence scheme in Totnes, and B shows a picture of a tree planting exercise, both of which, are flood risk management measures. So thank you. I just wanted to, show those pictures really to spark a bit of debate. Creating climate.
Kate, you've muted yourself somehow.
Oh dear, sorry.
It's all right.
Thank you. Hope you can hear me okay now.
Yeah.
So I was just saying, creating climate resilient places is the driving force behind our national flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy. And we believe that communities need access to a suite of tools to give them control of how they prepare for and respond to flooding and coastal change. And that could include constructing the traditional flood defences that you saw in the previous photos, as well as natural flood management, ensuring new development is safe from flood risk, designing buildings and adapting properties so that they can recover quickly from flooding, as well as what we're discussing tonight, which is empowering communities to keep themselves safe and minimise damage as well. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Martin. So our new flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy has got 3 long-term ambitions, really. The first one being to create climate resilient places, working with our partners to bolster resilience to flooding and coastal change, both now and in the face of the risks posed by climate change. The second ambition is to make sure that today's growth in infrastructure is resilient in tomorrow's climate too. So we're taking care to make the right investment and planning decisions to secure sustainable growth and environmental improvements, as well as infrastructure that's resilient to flooding and coastal change. And the third ambition is to create a nation of climate champions as well, ensuring that local people understand their risk to flooding and coastal change, and also know what's possible, what action can be taken to reduce the risk too. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Martin. So just to sort of summarise quickly and recap on what we've all been discussing tonight, it's really important, as I'm sure you'll agree, to take action within your own communities to prepare for hazards and emergencies such as flooding, whilst the Environment Agency and local councils do everything we can to reduce the chance of flooding. We can't eliminate the risk completely. It's a natural hazard, so I'm sure you'll all agree it's really important to be prepared. And for example, in relation to flooding, we'd encourage you all to check if you're at risk of flooding. You can do that on gov.uk and pop in your postcode. If you are at risk, sign up for our free flood warning service. Work together to form flood groups and community emergency planning teams. To do that, seek help from us all, from professional partners at North Devon Council, Devon County Council, Devon Communities Together, the Environment Agency, and of course, Devon Community Resilience Forum as well. And when your flood action groups work together to prepare for current risks, but also have a think about how you can reduce the chance of flooding and those risks and help to sort of deliver and drive local projects forward as well. Appreciate we've run through that quite quickly. So at this point, I think we hand back to Katie and Alex at North Devon Council and just open up to any questions.